on to help. There's one. Jimenez gets to the bag. Double play. See you later. That's all for the Braves in the 7th. Our witness to this gem. And this is a pop fly to Clint Barmes, 1 out in the 9th. Here we go. He's got the sign. Here's the 1-2. Ground ball to second. Barmes to first. Ubaldo Jimenez has no hit. The Atlanta Braves.
Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast presented by Strava Craft Coffee. Remember to use that promo code DNVR20 because this week you get 30% off your entire purchase of that CBD-infused, deliciously rich, and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I'm your host, Drew Creasman. I'm the managing editor of DNVR Rockies. With me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons. And on this episode, we continue our week-long conversation following the award season that we are in right now. On Monday, they were handing out Rookie of the Year, so we talked all-time Rockies rookies. Yesterday, it was Manager of the Year, so we talked all-time Rockies managers. Today, they're handing out that Cy Young Award, and so we're going to be talking all-time Rockies pitching seasons, and we're going to stretch outside of that a little bit too and just talk about some of our favorite non-Rockies pitching seasons. And we are especially thrilled to have along for the ride one of our favorite people, actually our favorite person to talk baseball with, pitching especially, former Colorado Rockies pitcher Mark Knudson. Thank you so much for joining, man. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thrilled to be here.
So as you heard me say there, we've been talking about, we did rookies, greatest rookies of all time. They're kind of a three-man race there at the top between Tulo, Todd Helton, and Jason Jennings, who actually won the thing. A couple of managers who were standout, right? And I feel like to get this conversation kicked off, Mark, I want to let you decide where we start, because in my mind, there's 3 individual seasons in Rockies history that really stand out from the rest. Most recently, of course, Kyle Freeland, 2018. You've got Ubaldo Jimenez in 2010. And lost in the shuffle oftentimes. People forget, actually, the best ERA plus, for those of you who are in that stat, in Rockies history. In 1994, Marvin Freeman. Which one of those stands out most to you?
Well, Marvin was a character. We all remember Marvin. And I think if you're going to talk about Marvin Freeman, you got to include Kevin Ritz, had I think a 17-win season. Pedro Estacio had some really good seasons there. But for dominance, those other 2 are the first 2 that come to mind. Ubaldo's first half of that season was miraculous. If Clint Barmes catches a pop-up, he's a 20-game winner. That still happened in the first half. He had a not-so-good second half, but he won, 11 or 12 games in the first half and was well on his way. Maybe more than that, to winning 20 games. A couple of them got away from him, but he was so dominant in that first half. As pitchers, as starting pitchers especially, we look at a block of 10 starts. And in 10 of those starts, twice, you're going to have incredible stuff and you're just going to cruise. Twice, you're going to have nothing and you're going to get knocked all over the place. Those middle 6, something's going to be working, something's not. You got to adjust. You got to mix and match. You got to figure out what I have good today, and you got to try to find a win more of those 6 games than you lose. That year, Ubaldo had, I don't know if he ever had 2 games where he didn't have something going, and he had he was fantastic stuff-wise all the way through. He didn't have to battle at all. In fact, I would point out that when he did have those games where he had less than stellar stuff, he didn't pitch very well. In fact, he had a lot. We saw that the rest of his career, he didn't do a good job of battling when something wasn't working. But for that period, the first half of that season, he wasn't breaking bats. He was exploding bats. I mean, his stuff was absolutely electric. Now you flip it over to Kyle in 2018, and Kyle's not the same kind of pitcher. He wasn't the power guy that Ubaldo was, but he was masterful. He was Greg Maddux-like in his precision, the way he was pitching. And we all remember the one hitter against the White Sox. It could have honestly easily been a no-hitter with a couple breaks there. So that was masterful in a totally different style, because Kyle can pitch when he doesn't have his best stuff. He can get people out when something's not working that day, which Ubaldo couldn't do.
Look at those 10 start numbers really you talk about.
Yeah,
10
exactly.
starts.
Yeah, there's no. He didn't have those down times. He had almost 8 or 10 games where everything was awesome. You just don't have that unless you're, Hall of Fame pitcher. So that first half that year was just unbelievable. But Kyle, I think we all appreciate what Kyle did because the manner in which he did it, which was not the overpowering stuff. It was just masterful pitching.
The one fun fact I took away from the 2011 season we're seeing here from Jimenez was the fact that he also got MVP votes, finished 23rd that year. Only the second player to ever get MVP votes from a pitcher. Houston Street also got some back in 2009. You typically don't see pitchers, in the MVP race. How hard is it for a starting pitcher to be one of the more valuable players on a team when they're only going out there every 5 days?
Well, they're only going out there every 5 days, but in certain situations, they're saving the bullpen for other days, or they're breaking a losing streak in certain situations. So, yeah, I think a pitcher can be an MVP. You're right, it's rare, but you can be because of the residual effects of the game, of what happens the days you're not starting. And I think we've seen that from Clayton Kershaw. We've seen that from some other guys, how much better the team is because of what he gives them every 5 days.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. That extra value that they bring even when they're not on the field. And I remember Ubaldo that year was going 7-8 innings all the time. Exactly. Guys don't do that anymore. And in hindsight, you wonder, did that burn his arm out a little bit? The blister issues that came up shortened his career. But while he was doing it, they sure did ride him. He was a horse for that.
And there's other ways you can be valuable as a starter too. And we've seen that more recently from guys like John Gray who go out and give up 3 or 4 or 5 runs early, but gather themselves and stretch it into the 7th inning to save the bullpen for the next day. That's a valuable. Be your own long reliever in a sense. That's a valuable trait too. And guys who are having Cy Young seasons will do that. They'll give up. Maybe they'll have a bad game and give up 3 or 4 in the first couple innings, but still stretch it into the 7th inning to save the bullpen. So yeah, starting pitchers can provide value in other ways other than just going out and dominating.
With Freeland, you said he was very Maddox-esque, and I think people forget that Maddox actually threw a little bit harder than they might remember. He was very much a finesse pitcher, but still got his share of strikeouts. Do you think that Freeland could ever actually win the Cy Young, considering the fact that you typically don't see a pitcher garner too many votes if he's not striking out close to 9 guys a game, and that's just not Freeland's game?
Perhaps, but I think about this. Brandon Webb and guys like that with the power sinkers weren't strikeout guys, but they were still. In fact, as a high school coach, I don't want my guys going out and trying to strike everybody out. I want them to put the ball in play to save their arm so they can go more innings, throw fewer pitches. So Kyle, that season, I remember his first start was a home opener against the Dodgers. I mean, think about that. His first major league start was the home opener against the Dodgers, and he was great that day. And then, of course, he had the near no-hitter right before the All-Star break. I think he was just super consistent in everything he did. And if we hear all about the altitude all the time, and they diminish hitters, and we've all three written about this and talked about this forever, that they diminish what Coors Field does to hitting statistics. They ought to benefit the pitchers. When a pitcher has a magnificent year at Coors Field, it should count for more than a guy who has a great season at Dodger Stadium. And that's why I think Kyle got shortchanged that year. He should have been. I think he finished 4th in the Cy Young. And yeah, there were some guys who had magnificent seasons that year, but he was right there with all of them. To do this at Coors Field, and again, he's a local kid. Coors Field doesn't affect him like it affects some other people. But to do that there and put those kind of numbers up at Coors Field should have counted for more than it did.
There's another element of the Freeland case that I think is interesting across all eras of baseball, Mark, that I really want to get your take on, because I argued a lot that year. I felt like he should have come in second. It was hard to argue with DeGrom's overall numbers.
Exactly.
But Freeland pitched in so many important games. And you look at what he did down the stretch that year, clinching the Rockies getting into the postseason. I know the wild card game technically doesn't, count for these awards, but all of the fact that he was pitching in so many important games. And I think, that he did that where, unfortunately, Marvin Freeman in '94, the team wasn't quite as competitive. Jimenez in 2010, that team was competitive, fell off at the end of the year. That Freeland powered through success. How different of an atmosphere is it for you as a starting pitcher when the postseason's on the line?
Yeah, that's a great point, Drew. And I think a lot of us point that too. In fact, I will go back to when Giancarlo Stanton was with the Marlins, won the MVP the year. How many games did he play that had playoff implications? I'd argue maybe only the 4 he played at Coors Field at the end of the year. in 2017, right? When
Mhm.
against the Rockies, it might have been only 4 games he played all year that had playoff implications, and Nolan should have won the MVP or Charlie that year, either one of them, because of that fact you're talking about. So I think it's overlooked. The games you pitch in, Bud likes to use the term high stress, so high stress innings, high stress pitches. DeGrom didn't have too many of those that year with a lousy Mets team, and he was getting lousy.
One is a high stress pitch.
Yeah, exactly. So that really should matter. In fact, I've always been an advocate, and I vote for the Heisman Trophy as well as, I mean, you guys vote for the baseball awards. They shouldn't give these awards out until the postseason's over, because the postseason's the most important part of the year. And so if a guy's going out and dealing in the postseason, I know they have separate awards and he gets the MVP, the NLCS or whatever, but if you're going to win the Cy Young Award, you should be putting those numbers up in the postseason. And you should be carrying your team through the postseason like Madison Bumgarner did that one year. Yeah. That, to me, should win you the Cy Young Award, not just having a good regular season. But that falls on deaf ears.
We've had those conversations before about how to effectively do that, or to create more awards in baseball, like just celebrate the game more. Do you think something like that, cheapens the game? If you got Gold Gloves over here, Silver Slugger over there, is it too much, or do you think baseball needs to do a better job in marketing the game?
I don't think that's terrible. Although this year, I don't think they should have given out any awards over a 60 game. I think the Dodgers won 1/3 of a World Series, and as great as Nolan was, he won 1/3 of a Gold Glove in my mind this year. But that's that's nitpicking. It's just me. But I think they're fine. Yeah, I mean, I think the way they do it is fine. I would just like to see them continue these awards, or have the postseason count, because those are the most important games these guys play in.
Yeah, we had talked about either doing it for the full postseason or for just doing separate postseason awards. And, because we talked about how this year, where a guy like Randy Arozarena wouldn't be up for any regular season awards, might be like second in postseason MVP voting, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool.
Well, I mean, who are they going to give the Heisman Trophy to this year? How many games is Heisman Trophy winner going to get to play in? I mean, I think that's, but if they have a playoff, that should determine who wins the Heisman Trophy. But we'll see if that even happens.
Yeah, there's already an issue of voters not seeing other teams play, and this year where it was so hard, where typically you vote on the National League awards, and you say, actually, we only saw teams from the West, NL and AL, so it's so hard to vote and be effective. But so far, it seems like the BBWA has done a pretty good job here. We're seeing some highlights. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I think those of you guys who vote did a really good job of, and those of you guys who have advocated for the additional statistics, as we're trying to, the ERA plus and the OPS and the WAR and all those. I think that makes it easier, honestly, for people to vote for an MVP. I mean, that's obviously why our buddy Manny Randall wants to kill the win, which is a nonsensical idea. Which I've told him a million times. You're never going to get rid of it. But if you add more stats to it, then a guy like DeGrom can win it, because you see the value beyond just the wins and losses.
Right. Yeah, I'm all for doing more recognition of good things that are going on inside the game of baseball. Speaking of someone who needs a little more recognition, just
Marvin
tell
Freeman.
us anything you want to tell us about Marvin Freeman. The floor is yours.
My favorite Marvin Freeman story is we've all heard Jim Rome's radio show, but when they were in San Diego, and Jim Rome was doing a show from the bleachers in San Diego, and they were heckling Marvin, and Marvin came up and got on the radio with them, and because they were giving Marvin such a hard time because he was such a goofball. That I remember listening to that and just laughing hysterically at the way Marvin was carrying himself. You can get away with that for a while. It obviously doesn't. There's not a lot of longevity, that kind of act, but for a while there, he was a lot of fun, and he made people believe you could pitch effectively at Coors Field, and that was obviously very important. And hit home runs at Coors Field too.
Yeah, there we see it. And he did it also at Mile High too, which was interesting to think about. What was it like pitching in that ballpark, and what were your memories? I imagine as a kid growing up in Colorado, you had been to games there to watch the Broncos, maybe even seen games of the Denver Bears at that time.
I worked at the stadium when the Denver Bears were there. Worked in the parking lot, so I'd go in and watch batting practice before I went on my shift, and I'd go out there and I collected hundreds of foul balls, dozens of foul balls during batting practice. I ended up going home and practicing with. So yeah, the Denver Bears were a big part of my youth. And then I played for the Zephyrs at Mile High. We won the American Association Championship and the AAA World Series in 1991. So I was very familiar with Mile High Stadium before I became a Rocky. And we knew all about the difficulties pitching there and the difficulty, how easy it was to hit, especially the left field. But again, I'll go back to the fact I'm a hometown kid. I grew up with these in these conditions. So the way my ball moved and the way my ball broke, that was normal for me. I'd have to change a little bit when I went on the road. And back up. When I got to Florida, I had to back off a little bit, which is much easier than adding on. I think Steve Reed and I've had the same conversation. Steve grew up in Montana, so he didn't have that much of a problem with Coors Field either, with Mile High Stadium, because he was used to these conditions. So that was a kind of an advantage for me. Well, at least was the reason I didn't complain about the altitude. I never have, because this is home. But guys who can adapt to it, like Marvin did that year, and tip of the hat. I mean, that's you got to adapt. That's for sure.
Especially looking back on it, because then, when he was doing it, you might have gone like, hey, what a great season for a guy pitching out, new ballpark, new area, new place, like all that stuff. We look back on it now, we see how few people have approached this level of dominance at Coors Field over a single season. Like, this is actually very special, very rare, and it's difficult to appreciate it fully at the time.
Yeah, I mean, again, you got to be tough mentally, but Don Baylor was the one who never let anybody think about it. Never let the pitchers use it as an excuse. He said, both teams are playing here. We're the home team. We got to get used to it. We got to adapt and get used to it. And I think they did for the most part when Don Baylor was the manager here. I don't think the complaining started until Don was gone. And then you got to start hearing guys like Brian Bohannon, Mr. Physical Fitness, was complaining about how tired he'd get here and all that. Come on. There's a reason elite athletes come here to train, to get in better physical condition. I think the current group at Coors Field is embracing that idea that this is where you train to get in prime physical condition. And then if you're in that much better shape, you should be dominating here. Tom Glavine told me after a game at Coors Field once in the clubhouse, I'm never more tired. I'm never more sore than I am after I pitch here. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that's good. That's called home field advantage. That's what the Rockies have to make it. And I think especially in the pre-Bud Black years and pre-Jeff Bridich years, it was being used as an excuse too often by a lot of guys, and it really shouldn't be an excuse. It should be an advantage.
We talked about Don Baylor yesterday on our DNVR Rockies podcast and how great of a manager he was and so respected. Even got a third place vote in 93 on a 67 win ball club or 65 win ball club.
Yep. And we did not lose 100 games, which was Don's preaching to us in spring training. We will not lose 100 games, and we did.
Did he seriously?
He certainly did. He absolutely did.
I love the team. I don't care what anyone says.
Did you play
the thing about
Don,
he was our. I played against him a lot, and then he became our hitting coach in Milwaukee. Yeah. He was brought in specifically to tutor Gary Sheffield, who was a problem child at that point. And Don was very frustrated by Gary Sheffield. I can promise you that. But Don was the first guy that introduced me to video. He had a portable VCR. As a starting pitcher, we'd spend games in the clubhouse running the VCR machine, changing tapes, cassette tapes. So Don had a tape on each hitter and each pitcher. I remember pitching a game against the Mariners at Milwaukee and getting on a getaway day. And I get on the plane and Don gives me his machine, his portable TV machine. And this was a big deal back in those days. And he said, "What?" I watched the game I just pitched. We didn't get to do that back then. Now it's easy, but then we couldn't do that. And I remember watching pitch by pitch the game I had just pitched against the Mariners because of Don Baylor. The thing that struck me about him when he made it as a manager, though, when I played for him for the time I played for him here, was as much as that we all hear about the Blake Street Bombers, just going up and hitting home runs. He wasn't Earl Weaver. He wasn't a guy that just sat back and played for the 3-run home run. He knew that guys had to get in motion on the bases, because if you do that, now the pitcher's distracted. Now the hitter's going to get better pitches to hit. And that offensive approach was tremendous. And I don't think anybody's mastered that since, where they say, okay, we're going to put runners in motion. We're going to hit and run. We're going to steal bases. Eric Young had magnificent stolen base seasons, obviously, under Don Baylor. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do those things because that's going to get the hitters better pitches to swing at. And I think that's a tremendous way to look at offensive baseball. And I try to do that now with my high school team. Don't sit back and play for doubles and home runs. You've got to move runners. You've got to get things going because your hitters are going to benefit from that. So, yeah, Don, I think underrated as a manager. I think he really was a really good manager. He didn't handle pitchers great because pitchers were his enemy as a player, and he wasn't very patient with, shall I say, with the pitchers. But I think given more time, I think he would have gotten there, and he could have been a really good pitcher, and he's really missed right now.
That's really astounding too, because Marvin Freeman was essentially a relief pitcher for 4 years going into it, made 5 starts between 90 and 93. And then all of a sudden he goes from the bullpen to a starter and does what he does.
And I can promise you the antics did not make Don Baylor happy. The sideshow that went along with Marvin did not make Don Baylor happy, I promise.
He's still doing that on Twitter. We should give him a shout out because he's still, pumping up his guys. Yeah.
We got to get him on the show. We got.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah.
He might take over your show.
We'll set aside 2.5 hours just in case.
Now, I do want to keep us on pitching because it's the topic of the day, but there's a slight, because we're in that era, detour that I want to take for 2 reasons. One, because I just wrote about this today. I just published an article about the Blake Street Bombers and how much of them were either products of Coors Field or just the fact that they were really, really good. And so, first of all, I want to recommend that anyone go and read that, but you got to be a subscriber. So if you're not subscribed, do that and use that code Rockies. Remember, we're trying to beat all the other beats. If you use the code Rockies, you get a free shirt, a free hat, free shirt, free mask, and a free sticker pack. So you got to do that. Really good stuff for you. And one of the things that I think was the most intriguing, because it's actually pretty clear for me, Walker and Burks, those guys were otherworldly talents who would have been phenomenal anywhere. Put them aside. They weren't products of Coors Field. Bichette and Castilla, maybe a little bit. Their best seasons clearly came in Denver. There's no as soon as they left, their numbers dropped. There's not a lot of evidence they could have been great elsewhere. Andres Galaraga, on the other hand, at 30 years old, turned into a monster. And while, some of it was coming to Mile High and coming out to Denver, like he continued on in San Francisco and Atlanta. I know he had a huge season there in 93. What do you remember about just watching this guy? Because he'd had some decent years in Montreal, then 3 years where he'd been pretty bad. And then he comes to Denver and he's this otherworldly guy. And I think it's cemented in a lot of people's minds, this idea that, just come to Coors Field and you can go from average hitter to great hitter. But it's pretty clear to me something else clicked with Andres Galaraga.
Well, I think it was a perfect storm, to be honest with you, for all 3 of those guys. Now, I was with Dante. We were teammates in Milwaukee when Don was the hitting coach. One of the reasons Don wanted to bring Dante over here, he saw the potential. He saw this was a guy whose best years were ahead of him. Dante's first year in Milwaukee, I think he hit 6 home runs. And I take that back. He had a bunch of home runs, but he was striking out a lot. Now, he replaced a guy in right field in Milwaukee named Rob Deere. And Rob Deere was, Dave Kingman-esque, swing from your heels. Yeah. Robbie would hit some bombs, but Robbie struck out all the time. And he drove our fans, our followers crazy because he struck out all the time. Well, Dante came in and started doing the same thing. So he started getting the same criticisms. And, oh, my God, it's another Rob Deere. He just strikes out all the time. Well, that's where Dante came up with the 2-strike approach that he used so well when he was here. And he used it exclusively, regardless of the count, the following season. Hit 6 home runs, but he hit 320. And I think it wasn't until he got here that Don Baylor can do both of those things. You can still hit the ball with authority because, Dante was massive. He had massive forearms. He could hit the ball a ton. And he had a little showmanship in him, but he was pretty shy at that point when he first came to Milwaukee. He really hadn't come into his own yet. Don Baylor brought him into his own, I think, gave him an opportunity to play every day in right field. Dante was a pretty good outfielder in his early days. So was Rob Deere, for that matter. They were very good defensive players. Which was totally overlooked because of the strikeouts. Dante didn't like the criticism he got for striking out, so he went to the 2-strike and he started flipping the ball to right field all the time, hit 6 home runs. And guys, what happened to the home runs? So Don helped him learn to do both. And I think Vinny was the same way. Vinny came and Don was the right manager in the right situation for Vinny. And certainly that's the case with Cat. Cat was a really good player. I played against him in Double-A when he was with the Expos. He was given his nickname because of his fielding prowess. We don't talk very much about that when we talk about Galaraga. He was an extraordinary defensive first baseman. Some people think one of the greatest ever. Now, he played in the same area as Keith Hernandez, who I think is the greatest defensive first baseman certainly that I've ever seen. But Cat was right there with him. And he didn't get enough credit for that. But that probably kept him in the big leagues during his hitting struggles. And I don't know when it was. I can't remember exactly when I saw him alter his batting stance to be so wide open. I tell my players, most guys who are right-handed are also right-eye dominant. So if you're crouching and turning and you're seeing the ball with your left eye, right? You're not seeing the ball with your right eye. I think Cat standing up like that and turning his head and being able to see the pitcher and striding into the ball helped him learn that. Again, that's Don Baylor helped him refine. So to say those three guys are totally products of Coors Field, I think is unfair. I think it was a perfect storm with them coming to Don Baylor, coming to a hitter-friendly environment, and suddenly becoming what they could have been all along.
Oh, look at it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's I love that batting stance. I've
I've
often wondered why more guys don't do that.
I try to teach my kids who are struggling to stand up straight, see the ball. You can see the ball with both eyes, because you hit with your eyes. You don't hit anything else. If you can't see the ball, you're not going to hit it. And people who are crouched and closed and turned, and you can only see the ball at the corner of your left eye, how are you supposed to hit the ball? You just aren't. So I think, that was a great. I'm not sure if Don helped him refine that, or if he did it before he came here. I don't remember. But he didn't swing that way in Double-A. So someone got with him, and it's just you have to be a great talent to do the things he did. It wasn't flukish.
He hit 44 home runs in Atlanta his first year away from Coors Field at the age of 37.
Yep. He was a gifted man.
It was all about getting healthy for him too. I think that was one reason that allowed Colorado to snatch him up so cheaply at first. They were giving him an opportunity, had to fill up that roster, and he came through in a real major way. You know,
I think.
Go ahead.
There's
Mark.
a lot of guys that fall into that category. A lot of guys that Don Baylor gave an opportunity, Vinny being one, Freddie Benavidez, Eric Young, guys like that, got their chance to come here and play regularly and made the most out of it. Vinny was a shortstop with Atlanta. They brought him over here as a shortstop in the draft, and they moved, and they saw Don and the staff saw this guy's prototypical third base type, and obviously he found his way there. And if not for Nolan Ryan, you're talking about best third baseman in the Rockies history.
A lot of guys got poached from that Atlanta club in the expansion draft.
They could afford it. Yeah. They were deep, pretty deep.
They're bleeding talent.
Yeah. You even have David Need, who's a guy that some of the old timers do remember. Of course, never factored into any Cy Young debates, but he was kind of the big young stud in '93 and going forward. Had a nice little career. What do you remember about the Rockies' first ever expansion pick?
David, it wasn't my place to tell him this, but I had learned when I played for the Zephyrs in, I think it was '88. My pitching coach was a guy named Jackson Todd, who had pitched with the Blue Jays. And he suggested I watch Earl Hershiser, who was having a monster season that year, and said, shorten your stride a little bit. You want to go downhill more. If you cut 6 inches off your stride, get on top of the ball and you'll throw the ball downhill more. And I took that to heart, and that really made a difference in me. My career took off at that point. I watched David throw, and I thought, this is a guy who's 5'10" or 5'11". He's trying to pitch like he's 6'8". He had a monstrously long stride. He took the mound completely, the downhill part of the mound completely out of the equation. And I've told him this. We talked about it. Saw him at the 20th reunion a few years back. But there was pictures of David in the clubhouse at Coors Field where he was so low, he looked Tom Seaver-ish. And listen, Tom Seaver was my guy. I wore 41 my whole career because of Tom Seaver. But I couldn't do what Tom Seaver did. In fact, Tom Seaver and I talked about the fact that I couldn't do what Tom Seaver did body-wise. And neither could David. And David just didn't have that kind of stuff. And I think he could have been better than he was if someone had really got with him and tweaked those mechanics. But he was a great kid, and he came in with a bunch of expectations and a bunch of hype, obviously. Everybody was overwhelmed by what we came into here that first year. But I remember I've talked to Kent Bottenfield about this a couple of times. I wrote a big article about Kent Bottenfield. And he said that opening game at Mile High Stadium, and he was pitching for Montreal before he became a Rocky later in the year. He said, it was so loud I couldn't even think. It was so loud. I never heard anything like that. He said, Philippe Alou came out to him and screamed at him, and he couldn't hear a word he was saying. It was just so loud with 80,000 people in the stands. So there was a lot on David and a lot on guys. That's why they picked Brent Smith to start that opener. But David came in with a lot of hype and a lot of expectations, and I think he handled himself really well during that period.
All right, Patrick, where are we at? Before we move on to the non-Rockies stuff, we've got a few other Rockies pitchers we don't want to forget about.
Well, the last guy basically that got a Cy Young Award vote would have been in 2007, 9th place, so he probably just got one third place vote. But we can't forget he's one of the four, Mr. Jeff Francis.
Yeah, another guy with I think I talked to Dan O'Dowd about Jeff one time, and he said, we knew his mechanical flaws were going to lead to arm problems. But we were riding it because he was going so good at such a point. He had the great demeanor on the mound. Nothing ever rattled him. He was just smooth as silk. And, left-handed in Coors Field is going to be a big advantage. So, I think had there been some mechanical changes, maybe that career lasts a little bit longer. But while he was on top of his game, he was fantastic. I mean, how many of us have been on the cover of Sports Illustrated? That was pretty cool. And and his running mate Aaron Cook was another guy with amazing stuff. That sinker was just ridiculous. And a guy here, I keep talking like a coach, right? Because that's what I do now. A guy who if I could have talked him out of that slide step when he had guys on base, he would go flat foot the side step. That sinker was about a foot higher when it got to home plate than it was out of the full windup when he had the tremendously high knee kick. If he could have found a way to duplicate it out of the stretch, I don't know if the guy ever got beat because his stuff was just incredible. So between the two of them, I honestly think better coaching might have benefited both of them, but nonetheless, they were fantastic when they were on top of their games.
You mentioned that advantage that left-handed pitchers have at Coors Field, and again, we know how minority of pitchers are left-handed, and yet half the guys that have factored into the Cy Young race for the Rockies have been left-handed. Do you think that's a strategy of roster construction that maybe Colorado needs to take advantage of more? To have at least
balance.
2, maybe 3.
I think last year, you want balance. They have balance. I think with Kyle, and they've had some other left-handers here. Certainly, you'd like to see what Rolison has when he comes up. There's a young left-hander. They have an advantage simply because the other team's going to play more righty batters, and it's a little tougher to hit. Right-handed hitters are usually a little bit less damaging than left-handed hitters. So that's the advantage. It's just how the other team's lineup construction. Yeah. But nonetheless, you got the shorter porch in right field, so you'd rather have right-handed hitters up and so on and so forth. But yeah, you definitely need balance. Now, it's not the same as it was with the 3-batter minimum. You can't have that left-handed, that Jesse Hurosco who could pitch till he's 50, because come and pitch to one guy every night. Those guys, kind of got the short end of that deal. But you have to have left-handers, and you have to have left-handers that can get righties out. I played for a guy who's not going to register on anybody's his radar, named Tony Fosus in Milwaukee. Bob Uecker nicknamed him the mechanic, because Uecker said he looked like a guy who would change your oil, not a guy who'd come in and pitch. And that's true. But Tom Troublehorn, our manager, would bring Tony into games to face a lefty, knowing the other team was going to put a righty in. But Tony's numbers were better against right-handers than were against left-handers. So that, you can find someone like that. And we've seen cases of that's moving forward. We've seen a few guys whose numbers don't match up with the righty-lefty thing. Those guys can be pretty valuable too. But I think balance is important when you're constructing a pitching staff, and you want to have some lefties you can count on for sure.
Yeah. And though he didn't factor into any great individual season, super producer Kale would throw things at me if I didn't mention his all-time favorite Colorado Rockie. And really, the best pitcher in Rockies history is Jorge De La Rosa.
Yeah.
And he didn't ever have any one season where he was super dominant. He's just the only guy to ever figure out how to pitch 6-7 years in a row at Coors Field and just be good.
It's funny. I mentioned that to Dick Monfort once, and he said to me, "Yeah, but he can't win on the road." Jeez, you can't have everything, can you? You're right. He is the greatest pitcher in Rockies.
70% of his home games.
Yeah. He is the best pitcher in Rockies history for just those reasons. And that goes back to what we're talking about being an MVP. How much benefit did the Rockies get from having a guy that could give them 7 innings every time? And they could count on that. They could count on getting 6 or 7 every time. That's how you set up your bullpen for other games. I mean, he was super valuable in that regard too. But he was quiet. Just went about his business. No Marvin Freeman and Jorge, obviously. Just went out and did his job. And, that guy was he was outstanding. Again, nothing super spectacular. He had the great splitter, but nothing overwhelming. He threw hard, but you never put him in that category either, that he was going to blow everybody away. He just knew how to pitch, knew how to use what he had, and he was really, really good at all of that, and really, really good here, which is cool.
Yeah. So before we move into the non-Rockies pitchers, we, of course, got to move a little bit of paper here. And since, the Cy Young Awards are coming out, obviously no time to bet on who's going to win them now, but I'm sure the odds will come out for next season here very, very, very soon. Apologies to anyone, by the way, who took my advice and put some money down on Germán Marquez to win the Cy Young this year. Didn't quite come out that way. It was a long shot.
It's always going to be a long shot with a Rocky hitter or a Rocky pitcher, obviously. And Germán is frustrating in a lot of ways because you see the ability and the talent that's there, and just never hasn't manifested itself over a full season just yet. But keep our fingers crossed, right? Right.
So, find out what the odds are for next year. Even though I'm doubling down, I don't care. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Check it out. But if you want maybe a little bit of buffer, if you're not quite ready to bet on next baseball season, maybe a bit of a pigskin fan, and that's actually all for the better, because our special right now hooks you up with Sunday's action, ensuring all new users are covered up to $100. That's right. You bet, and they cover risk-free on Sunday all of Sunday's action. And this weekend, there is plenty going on for you to get involved with. So download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use that promo code DNVR when you sign up and get this can't-miss offer. You must be 21 or older, Colorado only, risk-free coverage, paid out in site credits. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. Oh no, Wild the Innocent doesn't want us to move on from the Rockies just yet. Without a Josh Fogg Dragon Slayer mention. No Fogger? What is wrong with us? Well, there's a lot of guys, honestly, like that in Rockies history who've probably fallen through the cracks.
I don't think Josh would put himself in those categories either. I mean, as pitchers, we can really appreciate someone who's a cut above what we were able to do. And I'm sure Josh he did have some very big moments for the Rockies, but he was not among the all-time best.
No, he did take the ball in the best game.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Well, Mark, you played with and against some great players in your day who coincidentally ended up becoming Colorado Rockies. One of those guys, of course, being Brett Saberhagen, two-time Cy Young Award winner. You got to see him up close and personal in '89 with the Royals. You know, what did you take away from his career, and how did you like his transition in Colorado?
Well, I don't think it went so great in Colorado. I'm not sure he wasn't damaged goods when he got here, to be honest with you, because I was doing radio with KOA when he made his a game here. They ended up going 26 innings, I think, and Rockies lost 27 to, I mean, it was ridiculous. I can't remember what the score was. All I know is I didn't get home till 4 a.m. I know that. Wayne Hagan and Jeff Kingery stuck me on the air doing sports talk during a 3-hour rain delay. So Brett had started. I remember it was against the Cubs.
A lot, Wayne.
But the guy had Sabes had just tremendous physical stuff. I mean, I don't think there wasn't any trick there. There wasn't any. I love the delivery. I'm still a guy, and I saw some video of Bob Gibson this morning. I'm still a guy who likes the full windup. I like the guys who do a full windup because John Gray's motion makes me sick. I'm sorry, it does. It is this flat-footed, just go from nothing. Don't use your body. It leads to arm problems and inconsistencies. Now, coaches are teaching that at the lower levels right now because they want to simplify, let fewer moving parts. But it does damage to a guy later on in his life. But watch Sabes delivery, the full windup. He doesn't go over his head like most of us did, but he used his body really well, and he just had great natural stuff. I don't know that he wasn't a student of the game type, Maddox type guy. He was here it is, hit it, and that he for that period of time as a Royal, he was magnificent, just magnificent.
Well, Mark, if you're ever implicated in any crimes, we know where you were at on August 18th, 1995. That was the game against the Cubbies.
Oh, man. What was the final score? What was it? It was ridiculous. It was
26-7.
Yeah.
Saberhagen lasted for all of 1 out, 2 walks, 5 hits, 7 earned runs.
It was ugly. I remember that. And again, I think he was. I don't think he was right when we got him. I mean, it was a big deal when we got him at the trade deadline, but I just don't think he was right. We certainly never getting at the best of Brett Saberhagen when he came over here from the Mets, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's right. It was at the deadline. That was his 4th start with Colorado, and still ended up playing a couple more seasons with.
Well, listen.
Boston.
When I got home from the ballpark at 4 a.m, my wife was like, "Where have you been?" I said, "Did you hear about that plane that landed on the highway?" One of those deals, because we didn't get out there till. I mean, after doing the post game, I don't think we got out there till 3 o'clock in the morning. It was ridiculous. Where was that California tiebreaker back then when we needed it?
Well, you would have needed that around the 3rd inning at that point. a little early.
Pretty much. It was pretty bad.
Now, I heard a rumor that, and maybe you can set the record straight, Mark, that in your career, you beat 3 members of the 4,000 Strikeout Club: Nolan Ryan, Roger Clemens, and Randy Johnson. Is that true in your career? Did you face those guys and beat them?
I did. I didn't pitch against Steve Carlton. I played against Steve Carlton when he was on the downhill side, so I didn't get to do all 4. But what fails to mention is some of the guys that I couldn't beat. There was a lot of guys you've never heard of that I couldn't beat. So it works out that way. I got an opportunity to pitch against Nolan on opening day in 1991, and that came about because I was slated to be the number 3 starter that year. But Teddy Higuera, our number 1 guy, went down with an injury. Chris Bosio, our number 2 guy, went down with an injury, and lo and behold, the guy who stayed healthy got to pitch opening day. I didn't have my best game. Nolan certainly didn't have his best. I think Robin hit a home run. I know I gave up one to Kevin Reimer, but we ended up getting the win. So I ended up getting the decision that day, which was, I mean, obviously that's a highlight. Nolan had been my teammate in Houston when I was first drafted. I learned a lot from just watching him carry himself, how he prepared to start, not just how he started, but how he prepared to start. He was just spectacular, a spectacular teacher. Nolan Ryan was not an outwardly talkative guy about it, but if you came to Nolan and he would tell you flat out, here's what you're not doing. Here's where you suck, and here's what you need. And it was great to be around that man. I learned a lot. From that man, and get a chance to pitch against. But I also got a chance to participate in his 300th win in Milwaukee, as I came in relief in that game. It was supposed to be my day to throw on the side, but back then we didn't have 14-man pitching staffs. We only had 10 guys on the pitching staff. So if somebody was on the shelf that day, the guy who's on the side's gonna have to pitch. And I ended up pitching to two guys. They both bunted. They both reached base. Tony Fosus, the aforementioned mechanic, gave up a home run to I think it was Julio Franco, and I ended up giving up some earnings that day I shouldn't have given up. But Nolan got his 300th win that night against us Milwaukee. So he was, and it was, part of me was very happy to be. I'm very happy to have been there that day, and part of me was happy to participate in that game. So he was a legend.
Yeah, Nolan was a guy I wanted to get your opinion on. Besides playing with him in '86, I mean, when you were drafted in '82. That guy, every time you would go to spring, I mean, that was the guy. He was the epitome of a starting pitcher at that time and for the organization.
Nolan was the ultimate competitor. We used to talk about, back in those days, you could advertise cigarettes, and all the ballparks had the big giant Marlboro man on the wall, outfield wall. We said Nolan Ryan is the Marlboro man. That's who he is. His nickname is Tex. He's from Texas. But I remember going to spring training and watching him throw batting practice. You know, guys you put the L screen up there and you're throwing some BP. Well, guys didn't want to hit against Nolan, and I couldn't figure out why. It's just BP. He didn't want you to hit the ball. He would throw, if guys took big swings, he would throw at them in the batting cage. He would throw at guys, and he would finish his round of BP. He would go and run foul pole to foul pole. Then he'd come back and throw some more. And if you took a big swing, you're on your keister the next pitch. And that's during spring training with an L screen in front of you. The man was an ultimate competitor. He'd go pitch 6, 7 one-hit innings, and he'd come in and ride the exercise bike for 30 minutes after he got done. I honestly, trying to follow him around in the weight room and work out with the man, it was like trying to duplicate what Superman was doing. I always tell people he wasn't human; he's from Krypton. He able to pitch like that at age 46. It was just miraculous. But it was a testament to the hard work he put in between starts. And I think I learned more from that than I did I couldn't duplicate what he did on the mound, so I didn't try to do that. But I tried to duplicate what he did between starts. Just make myself that much better, because he was just amazing.
When he hung it up in '93, do you think he could have probably hung on and been competitive for a couple more years?
No. If you remember, he walked off the field in Seattle holding his arm. He got hurt against the Mariners. I think it was pretty much done at that point. His last, and I was really sad at that point because I retired in '93, and I remember watching him come off the field and thinking, it's just a shame that he doesn't end on a higher note than that, because it was kind of a quiet exit for one of the greats of all time.
A very loud career.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
And it also strikes me because, there's so many other greats in other sports. I think Michael Jordan sort of famously wasn't the best teacher. Right. It was like, how do you tell people to just do it like Michael Jordan, right?
You don't.
And so how did he bridge that gap?
Well, it's why great players don't oftentimes make great managers, right? I mean, think about it. How many Hall of Fame players become good baseball managers? Not very many. Hardly any. Ted Williams was a lousy manager, right? Pete Rose was a lousy manager. So I think some of that communication skill is here's what I did to get there. Some of it's just natural ability. Those guys have so much natural ability that they have a hard time explaining, why can't you do what I do? Keith Hernandez is a guy that I talk to when he comes into Coors Field. We played against him, and he wrote a book about this. They actually had him sit down. I was in his first book, by the way. In his first book, he was a diary of the '86 season, and the Mets came in and knocked me around, and he was kind of ripping me in his book. I was injured. I tried to pitch hurt, and didn't do very well. And so I got
all the facts in there.
I bought my dad the book for Christmas, and my dad said, "You got to hit that effer next year." Well, I got him out the next time I faced him, but he did apologize to me later. He said, "I never knew you were hurt," but that doesn't matter. The book he wrote after we'd all retired, he analyzed 2 games. He sat down and watched one on TV, and he sat down and watched one in person, and he analyzed them pitch by pitch. And I said, "Why wouldn't you want to be a manager?" He goes, "I'd have to do that every night. I can't do it. I couldn't do that every single night because that's what managers have to do. That's what catchers can do. And that's why you have half the major league managers are former catchers because they analyze things. Everything changes depending on the outcome of the last pitch. And that's why catchers usually make such good managers. But somebody like Nolan, again, he didn't teach by telling you something. He never came up to people and told people anything. He led by example. You watched him and you tried to learn from him. I remember we were in Philadelphia, and I hadn't been to Philadelphia before. So I got up that morning, put on my T-shirt and shorts, and I was going to go walk around and see where Rocky made a statue and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I come back in the hotel right about lunchtime, and I just walk in the front door and I go to the elevator and I go up to my room. No problem, right? Change my clothes, get ready, get on the early bus and go to the ballpark. Well, the early bus was me and Nolan and Charlie Kerfeld and a couple other guys. And Nolan starts talking in the clubhouse, which he never really did. And he said, and he's got that high-pitched Texas drawl, and he said, I saw something I've never seen before today. And we all kind of, what was that? He goes, I saw a major league ball player walking through the lobby in shorts and tennis shoes. I just started slinking down in my chair, right? Because I know he's talking about me. He didn't call me out, but he's talking about me. And there's only a few guys in there. But I'm like, where can I hide? I just got called out by the great Nolan Ryan. Where can I hide right now?
Oh, man.
And I just, at that point, Nolan was from the era where you didn't leave your hotel room without a tie on. And that's it. Sparky Anderson wouldn't let his guys leave without a jacket and tie on. It didn't 112 degrees in Arlington. You're still wearing a coat and tie to the ballpark that night. So Houston wasn't quite that strict, but Nolan was. This is what you do. I was telling somebody the other night, I had a cousin lived in Iowa, was in the cattle business, and they came down to watch me pitch in Houston. And Nolan was in the cattle business. And so I got him into the ballpark early for batting practice, and he comes in, he goes, can I meet Nolan? So I asked Nolan to come over. So I brought him together at the backstop. And my cousin introduced himself and said he does this. And they talked cattle for 30 minutes. I'm like, what are you doing? My cousin didn't mention baseball to Nolan Ryan and talked cattle with him for 30 minutes. I said, what a great guy. I said, you didn't even say baseball to him. Well, yeah, we were talking cattle. That's the kind of guy he was. And again, you went to him for advice, and he'd give it to you. In fact, I interviewed him once. I was an active player, but I was writing a diary for the Rocky Mountain News. May they rest in peace.
Seriously.
Right. And so I put my tape recorder down on the plate. We're both in our uniforms. We're in the lunchroom. I put my tape recorder down in the middle of the table, and I started interviewing him. Nolan didn't take it as an interview. Nolan looked at me. He was lecturing me. He was telling me how I'm going to do things. He didn't look at the microphone. He didn't talk to the microphone. He answered my questions like he was the professor and I was the student, and that's how I took it. I still have that cassette tape.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's cool that Nolan, your cousin, made you the third wheel. And you're like, hey,
no
man.
question. Yeah, I don't know anything about cattle.
Another guy who pitched, rather late into his career was also from Texas that you got to see pretty up close in the AL East was Roger Clemens, 87 AL Cy Young Award, won in 86, was the MVP that year.
He was good. If I recall correctly, he was good.
He was not bad. In fact, the game that I beat him in Fenway, he struck out 11 or 12. I struck out 2. And you talk about getting the most out. I threw 89
Who's
pitches.
counting, though?
It was late in the year, and I think they'd already won the division, and they wanted to go home. And so Jody Reed and Ellis and the rest of those guys were up there swinging at the first pitch. It was great.
Well.
It was great. Slider, sinker, and hit a ground ball, and we're out of here. And so I think I beat him 3-1 in there. But he was just – I remember asking an umpire once. I said, we can't hit this guy. What if one of our guys just charged him out? Would you throw him out of the game? He said, yeah. I said, why don't we just have somebody go up there and get hit? And nobody wanted to do it. Here's video against us right here against Milwaukee. He was the closest thing there is to Nolan Ryan. And I'm not even talking about the steroids thing because we know that alters his finals career stats, and that makes he pitched longer than he should have and all that. But while he was what you're seeing on the screen right now, he was again that beautiful full wind-up delivery, effortless. He was known for his workout routine. At that point, I think Roger'd gotten into what Steve Carlton did, the rice bucket, kind of the kung fu kind of stuff. It was another way of training, but it's just the same thing. It's just incredibly hard work. And he was known for that as well, just like Nolan. And he idolized Nolan. He wanted to be Nolan. He was the closest thing to somebody that could be Nolan because he just, he developed a split finger later in his career, just like Nolan developed a changeup. But the miraculous thing was I saw Roger in college when he was at Texas, played against him in the summer leagues in Kansas and Nebraska. Wasn't anywhere near this kind of pitcher. Saw him in A-ball, wasn't near this kind of pitcher. Really made himself into a great Hall of Fame pitcher.
Well,
That's
it's funny you
like
mentioned him. It's funny you mentioning him pitching at the University of Texas, and he actually at 56 years old recently, I think it was last summer, played in an alumni game. And Kale's got the video for us. He's going to pull that up, and you can see his determination at 56.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
I do not doubt it.
I don't know if you want to give him a scouting report at 56, but you can kind of see, the best of his stuff here in this start, and he's got 20-year-olds, behind him playing defense, but it doesn't matter. Even a couple of them were his kids. He wanted to go out and shove, and at 56, he kind of held his own, gave up a couple runs. Again, was not very happy, and our buddy John Boy did a good job covering this video.
I know I've played in a lot of alumni games, and you get the juices get flowing a little bit. You don't want to be embarrassed. You're going to go out there and do what you can do, but I think most of us would say that we can. Again, you can see here we can duplicate our pitching motion. I could duplicate my pitching motion right now, but just the next day I wouldn't be able to walk. That's just how it works. You just can't bounce back and do what you do. I play catch. I don't throw batting practice for my team at all because I know I could. First of all, I'd hit people because I don't know how to just stand up there and toss it in there and throw strikes. If I try to go through a whole delivery like that,
and stuff.
I'd be hitting people all over the place. But again, it's just because I want to be able to move my arm the next day. So I think Nolan or Roger probably felt like I'm going to go give it this what I got, but tomorrow I'm going to spend a lot of time in the hot tub.
Walking is overrated, in my opinion. So you got to go out there and get the job done there.
I don't know.
He's still got it. He still looks like he's got some movement on that deuce he's got.
he 94 on that fastball.
Yeah. He doing it for one day. I think, I could see that. But tomorrow, the next day after this, he was a hurting unit. I promise.
It was feeling.
It's fun though. Those kids had to have a great time doing this though. What a great thing for them.
Bruce Hurst, another guy, played with Clemens, had a really great season in '88. He ended up pitching. He was on the ’93 Rockies too, right?
Briefly, I came over in the trade the ill-fated trade that sent Brad Osmus to San Diego. They brought Greg Harris, my former teammate with the Padres, came over too in that trade, and I played with Bruce a little bit in '92. Didn't have the same stuff he had as a Red Sox. As a Red Sox, he was amazing. The prototypical lefty, get guys to get themselves out, especially righties trying to hit over the green monster. Bruce was a great guy. He's a BYU guy or Utah. I know he's from Utah. I don't think he went to BYU, but Bruce was a tough, great competitor. All these guys, let's get lost. All these guys were great competitors. A lot of these guys would have trouble pitching now because they'd get taken out of the game in the fifth inning and they'd be angry. I mean, Roger's he's planning to go 7 or 8 innings. I know I always felt like if I didn't get into the 7th inning, I didn't do my job. We used to call it 5 and fly, and it was not a good thing. If you did a 5 and fly, you're not happy. Nowadays, the starter goes 5 innings. Yeah, great. We got the bullpen lined up. And I think some of these competitors, I mean, can you imagine being the manager trying to go take the ball out of Bob Gibson's hands in a tight game in the 7th inning? That wasn't happening. Roger wasn't going to give the ball up in the 7th inning of a 1-1 game. Neither was Bruce. It's just the way they were back then. It's just the game's changed a lot in that way, not necessarily for the better.
Yeah, Mark, Bill Swift was a guy in '93 with the Giants, second in the NL Cy Young. He came over with Larry Walker. A lot of people don't remember that offseason, again, a very short offseason because it was after the strike, that the Rockies essentially got the 2 biggest free agents with Larry Walker and Bill Swift. Did you think he would have a slightly better transition? I think he pitched well, but he wasn't the same Bill Swift.
Well, again, when he was in San Francisco, he had that heavy air, and he's a sinker ball guy and all that. And I think it was a perfect place for him to pitch. This was not necessarily a good fit. The Rockies back then were looking for ground ball pitchers, and I think they've realized that now they need guys that can strike people out because ball that gets hit on the ground can still be a hit. Ball gets into the catcher's mitt, didn't do any damage. So I think they're looking for more power guys now than they used to. But back then, Billy fit the profile of the guy you wanted here because he was a sinker ball guy. He had success with the Expos and success with San Francisco, and it just didn't work. And again, I don't think he was 100% healthy in himself when he got here either. I don't want to use the term damaged goods, but it just wasn't 100% healthy when he came over here.
Yeah, that was I vaguely remember that. I was pretty well. Let me do the math real quick. I was 8, 9 years old. And I remember being disappointed.
Now you're showing off.
Sorry.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I did watch those. It's funny because those are they are just some of my earliest memories of being really plugged into baseball, and I remember thinking, we got Larry Walker and Bill Swift, and then Bill Swift kind of became a thing, and then Larry Walker became Larry Walker, and
Hall of Famer,
yeah.
Yep.
There you go. There it
is. During your career, Mark, two other guys I want to talk about. I know you'll have a lot to say about another one and about one of them. The other one, I'm really interested to see what your take. I'll give you the easy one first. Robin Yount, 89 AL MVP, Hall of Famer. I mean, what is there left to be said about him? But you got to see him up close
only guy win the MVP at two different positions because he was MVP as a shortstop and a center fielder. Yeah. Again, that you can't talk about Robin without talking about Paul Molitor, obviously. But team. I mean, Robin was all about the team. We didn't have the electronics with the scoreboard didn't display your batting average and all that kind of stuff. Normally, guys would have to have a game, and then the next day, the day after the game, guys the PR department would come in with the things we get in the press box now. Drew the big long double-sided sheets of paper that have all the stats on. They'd come in and drop them on the table in the middle of the room, and you'd see guys wander over there because they wanted to see what their ERA was or their batting average was. They didn't, because you didn't know unless you saw the morning paper. Robin never one time ever went over there to see what his batting average was. He never wanted to see where he was on the all-time hit list or this or the other. Robin and Paul would. Robin would sometimes sacrifice himself in the first. He's batting second. Paul's leading off. Paul gets on first base. Robin's going to hit the ball the right side or take as many pitches as he can to be able to tell the guys coming up after him what this guy's got today. Right. We were facing Don Sutton once. Don had been a former Brewer, was now pitching for the Angels. We're facing Don Sutton on a day game, and they had been talking to me about how Don Sutton cuts the ball. He physically cut the ball, put a little cut in the ball to make it move. And so I said, I'm going to check this out. So Paul leads off the game, gets on base. I don't remember if he got a hit or a walk, but Robin comes up and hits a screaming one hopper right to the second baseman, bobbles a little bit, flips it to second. The shortstop throw comes into our dugout, and I go over and I grab the ball. And sure enough, it's got a cut mark right where Robin said it would. And Robin comes back to the dugouts after the inning. He said, "Yeah, I hit a what do you call it, a scuff ball or a cutter or whatever." He goes, "Yeah." And I'm thinking, why don't these guys say something to the umpire about this? You didn't do that back then. You didn't rat out your former teammate like that. You just battled him. You knew what he had. You knew what he was going to do. You just battled him. And that's the way Robin approached the game. Robin, Don Baylor and Robin were a really good combination when they got there because they're both old school, here's how you play the game the right way type guys. And you don't worry about your stats and you don't worry about your accolades. You certainly don't have a Twitter handle, not that existed back then, but you see what I'm saying. You're not self-promote. There was no self-promotion in Robin Yount, none. Even now, if he comes back to a game in Milwaukee, he's kind of sheepish about things. He was sheepish about attention. He just wanted to go out and play. And, that famous picture when Juan Nieves threw a no-hitter for us in 87, Robin, the last out, Robin dives for a fly ball and catches it in right center field in Baltimore. And I always teased him. I said, "You didn't have to dive for that ball, did you?" And he kind of looks at it, get a little grin. He goes, "I probably could have caught it if I kept it running nice." But he dove for the ball to finish off Juan Nieves' no-hitter. And, I mean, that's an iconic image now.
For him.
There's a lot of iconic images with Robin Yount, but he was just the ultimate team guy, the ultimate pro, the great teammate. And I tell my high school kids now, if you leave here, one thing I want to remember about you is that you're a great teammate. Not your batting average, not how many games you win, not how many guys you strike out, but that you're a great teammate. And I think that goes underrated sometimes. And you can't underrate that with Robin Yount. He was the ultimate teammate.
You also can't overrate his hair. Best hair of any teammate you've ever had.
The thing is that he still got it that way. It's so nasty now.
He looks amazing.
It looks so bad now. He's 65 years old. He's still got the. I'd like to. I saw him, his nickname is Kid. So I said, if I saw Kid right now, I'd like, dude, cut that stuff off already. Gee, he's probably down. He lives down in Phoenix. He's probably on his motorcycle right now. His dirt bike right now. Couldn't sit still.
I got similar lettuce coming off my head here.
Yeah, but it's not all gray. It's not all gray. Robin's is all gray and nasty now.
All right, the second guy I wanted to get back to, we talk about these guys who are on the cusp for being a Hall of Famer. You talk about how great Keith Hernandez was, of course. Don Mattingly, a borderline Hall of Famer, great manager. Yep. Dave Parker, you played with him in '90. He was an All-Star that season. It was his last big year.
He was.
What's your take on the Rattlesnake?
Well, we called him Parkway, and he Dante had the sledgehammer when he got here, and they played sledgehammer for him when he goes to bat and all that. Well, he got that from Dave because they were traded for each other. Dave went to the Angels when Dante came to the Brewers, and Dave left behind his blue and gold sledgehammer that he'd swing on deck. This is a guy whose mouth never stopped. I honestly got his mouth never stopped. I was kind of thin then, and he'd tell me I'd be stretching. He said, "Get your big pipe cleaner body up off the ground." He was teasing everybody all the time. But obviously we've all seen the throw from right field in the All-Star game, and the great ability was amazing. But he's also he was a great teammate in a different way. He was just an entertaining guy to be around, and he was. You guys remember Zubaz pants? Those those sweatpants that had different colors. He got on the bottom floor of that. And he would bring them into the clubhouse trying to sell them to us. He was a salesman. He was selling cell phones. He was selling Zubaz. He was into all that stuff. But one thing I always remember about Park that people didn't know, he would not sign a baseball card of a team he wasn't currently playing for. So like when people bring up Pirates cards to him when he's a Brewer, he wouldn't sign them. He'd only sign Brewer cards. And when it was the Reds, the same way, it was only Reds cards. So he was an interesting character. He was a very interesting character and a fun guy to be around. And I think we all benefited, obviously, from having him there. But when they made the trade, they brought Dante to Milwaukee. I think, Dave's now he's on the team with Reggie Jackson. Oof. I would have been a fly on the wall in that clubhouse. That would have been fun.
Maybe have one of those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
That's good stuff. I think that's all the players that we wanted to talk to you about, man. I feel like we could go on and on forever.
Oh, yeah.
But
we all got stories.
I understand. Yeah, absolutely. There will be more in the future. We'll have to have you back. Get a little more. I feel like the Greg Maddux itch barely got scratched there. There's more to talk about there. Plenty of other stuff. I even just want to talk about a few random ones. Just Pedro Martinez appreciation I was hoping to get to today. We didn't get any of that in here.
Only time I faced Pedro, he walked me on 4 pitches. I think he saw me on the on-deck circle, saw me swing back. I'm part of that guy.
He watched you on 4 pitches?
4 pitches. It was in AAA, so it doesn't matter. It was in AAA.
Tucson? Was it Tucson?
He was in Albuquerque. He was on the same team with Mike Piazza and Eric Young and those guys in Albuquerque in '92, and I was playing for Las Vegas that year. So,
yeah, he's in the Albuquerque Dukes Hall of Fame with his brothers, Ramon. And
what
was the third brother?
I don't remember the third brother. He wasn't there at that time. He was younger.
No.
But yeah, he was. Pedro liked Pedro back then. Pedro had a picture of himself in his locker. Okay. We had to walk through their locker room to get to the weight room. So we go through there and see Pedro, a picture of himself in his locker. So, hey, Dig Me. Nicknamed him Dig Me. But he was obviously went on to great things.
I mean, he was incredible. Mark, we'll have you back.
All right, guys.
We can't get enough. We thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure.
Hey, plug away. Let us know where folks can hear you on the radio, and you got some articles coming out as well. I know.
WoodyPage.com, Twitter @Mark Knudsen41 for the great Tom Seaver, and KFKA website in Greeley. I do. Drew does some stuff up there with Brady Hall. I do. I write a blog for them as well. So on 1600 a.m. Saturday mornings, 8 to 10. ESPN Radio.
KFKA in Greeley, Colorado. They do a great job up there. So. We'll keep reading you. We'll keep listening to what you're doing, and we'll invite you back sometime. Everybody out there, make sure you're following everyone on social media at Drew Creasman, at Patrick D. Lyons. It's at Mark Knudsen, right? It's not
41 at Mark. Got Tom Seaver in there. That salute to Tom.
That's right. Make sure you're subscribed, as we said before, to the DNVR.com. Use that promo code Rockies right now, because when you sign up, you get a free shirt, mask, and a sticker pack. We're trying to beat all the other beats out there, doing a little sub drive right now. I'm diving deep into the Coors Field conundrum. I told you we did the Blake Street Bombers. Next, it's Todd and the Toddlers. I'm going to do a whole article on just Juan Pierre and how he fits into this whole Coors Field conundrum thing. Because, well, first of all, you knew I was going to do that. But
boy.
Thank you so much for listening into this. It's just going to be, I think it's going to continue to be a fascinating offseason. We didn't even get your takes on that and how no one's going to spend any money all offseason.
No, none, zero, nothing. We'll talk about it next time.
$0 will be spent.
Zero,
That's
yeah.
Right. We've got to have
Derek Rodriguez used up the budget, so that's it.
They got a lefty today. I can't remember his name already.
Ryan Gonzalez.
That's the whole point. Yeah. You can't remember his name. That's the whole point.
That's right. That's right.
All right, guys.
Thanks so much, everyone, for listening in. Continue to be absolutely awesome out there. We will continue to be absolutely Patrick Lyons, Drew Creasman, and Mark Knudsen in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.